There is a moment that every person who has ever been disrespected knows intimately. It arrives without warning. Someone says something, does something, dismisses you in a way that makes the air in the room feel different. And in that moment, two versions of you compete for control. The version that reacts, that defends, that scrambles to restore what was just taken. And the version that has read the room correctly and understands that what just happened was not an accident. It was a test. The world does not distribute respect equally or fairly. It never has. Respect flows toward those who understand something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. That the social world is governed not by kindness, not by merit, not by who deserves what, but by power, by perception, by the cold and precise mechanics of how you carry yourself when the pressure arrives. Niccolò Machiavelli spent his life inside the machinery of power. He watched princes rise and collapse. He studied the patterns that separated those who commanded rooms from those who were quietly consumed by them. What he discovered was not cynical, it was honest. And honest is exactly what you need right now. What follows is not a list of tips for feeling better. This is a strategic framework, 9 cold, psychologically precise methods for handling those who have chosen to disrespect you. Some of these methods are silent, some are social, some are internal. All of them are effective. And by the time you reach the end, you will understand the game in a way that makes you genuinely difficult to play against. Sway 1. The execution of absolute silence. Every act of disrespect is built on an expectation. The person who delivers it has already imagined your response. They have prepared for your anger, rehearsed against your defense, and positioned themselves to handle your reaction. This is the trap, and most people walk directly into it every single time. When you react, when you raise your voice, when you fire back, when you visibly flinch, you confirm the most important thing your aggressor needed to know. That they have access to your emotional state. That the right words, delivered at the right moment, can move you. You have just handed them a map of your interior, and they will use it again. Machiavelli was explicit on this point. The ruler who responds visibly to every provocation is a ruler whose enemies understand exactly how to manipulate him. Emotional visibility is a liability. It tells people where to push. The alternative is not suppression. It is not the tight-jawed, visibly straining performance of someone holding themselves back. That is still a reaction. They can see the effort. The alternative is genuine, chosen stillness. The deliberate withdrawal of your emotional signal entirely. When someone disrespects you and receives nothing in return, no scoff, no shift in posture, no change in expression, just the calm, detached gaze of someone observing something mildly unremarkable, the dynamic in the room changes immediately. They expected a fight, they prepared for your energy. Instead, they find a void. And humans are psychologically wired to find voids unbearable. The silence does not belong to you. You gave it to them. Now they must sit in it, fill it with their own doubt, replay the moment, and wonder if they have made a miscalculation they cannot yet see the consequences of. They have, and your silence is the first consequence. This is not a one-time technique. It is a discipline. Practice it until it becomes genuine, until you reach a place where the absence of reaction is not an effort, but simply a reflection of the fact that certain people do not warrant your energy. When that becomes true for you internally, it becomes visible externally, and people will feel the difference. Way 2. Weaponized professionalism. Most people understand that overt aggression is a losing move. And what they do not understand is that there is a form of response that is colder than silence, more precise than anger, and infinitely more unsettling to someone who expected to provoke you. It is the complete, clinical withdrawal of warmth, executed through perfect, almost surgical professionalism. When someone is rude, dismissive, or openly disrespectful, respond with formality so deliberate it becomes its own statement. Straighten your posture, slow your speech. Address them with titles if the setting permits. Follow every rule, every protocol, every social convention with exacting precision. Become, in that moment, the most professionally composed person in the room. This does two things simultaneously. First, it places a wall of glass between you and them. Not the wall of someone who is hurt or angry, neither but the wall of someone who has reclassified them. You are no longer treating them as a peer, a friend, someone whose comfort matters to you. You are treating them the way you would treat a stranger in a formal setting. Correct, distant, entirely without warmth. Second, and more devastatingly, it throws their behavior into sharp relief. When they are emotional and you are composed, when they are informal and you are precise, when they are reactive and you are measured, the contrast is visible to every person watching. They look like someone having a tantrum. You look like someone enduring it with extraordinary patience. Machiavelli understood that in courts and corridors of power, it is not the loudest person who wins. It is the person whose conduct is irreproachable under fire. When your behavior cannot be criticized, the focus of the room shifts entirely to theirs. You have not attacked them. You have simply held a mirror up with perfect posture and let them see themselves in it. Way 3. Revoke access without explanation. Your time is not a public utility. Your attention is not a right that anyone is entitled to simply because they exist in your proximity. Your presence, your conversation, your engagement, your loyalty, these are finite resources of genuine value. And the moment someone demonstrates through their behavior that they do not recognize that value, they have forfeited their claim to it. This is the principle most people understand intellectually and fail to apply emotionally. They tolerate disrespect because removing someone from their life feels dramatic, or lonely, or confrontational. They fear the awkwardness of the withdrawal more than they resent the cost of staying. But consider what staying communicates. It tells the person who disrespected you, and everyone watching, that your presence has no real conditions attached to it, that it can be taken for granted, that even after being treated poorly, you will continue showing up, responding, engaging, as though nothing has changed. You have just confirmed that there is no cost to disrespecting you. You have set the price of your own mistreatment at 0. The strategic move is withdrawal. Clean, quiet, complete. No announcement, no lengthy explanation of how they hurt you and what you need them to understand. Explanation in this context is not closure. It is a request for their validation of your decision, which means you are still operating with their approval as a variable in your life. Remove that variable. Simply become less available. Respond slower or not at all. Show up less. Invest your energy elsewhere. Let your absence accumulate into an undeniable signal that something has shifted, without ever giving them the dignity of a formal declaration. What happens next is reliable and instructive. The person who took your presence for granted begins to notice its withdrawal. The certainty they felt about your availability starts to develop cracks. And in those cracks, the lesson arrives, not because you delivered it, but because they discovered it themselves in the discomfort of your absence. Scarcity creates value. What is always available is never truly appreciated. What can disappear creates a different kind of attention entirely. Way 4. The long rope. There is a category of disrespect that wears a costume. It arrives dressed as humor. It announces itself as sarcasm, as a joke, as playful teasing, always with the escape hatch of "I was just kidding," preloaded and ready to deploy the moment it meets real resistance. This is the coward's version of aggression. It tests what it can get away with while maintaining plausible deniability. Most people respond to this in one of 2 ways, both of which lose. They laugh along, which signals acceptance, or they react with visible irritation, which triggers the "relax, it was just a joke" defense and makes them look oversensitive. The aggressor wins either way. The Machiavellian response is neither. It is the cold inquiry. When someone makes a disrespectful comment disguised as humor, stop. Do not laugh. So do not look offended. Simply look at them with calm, unhurried attention and say the most devastating sentence available to you in that moment. "I don't get it. Explain the joke to me." Say it without edge. Say it without sarcasm. Say it with the genuine, patient curiosity of someone who would very much like to understand. What follows is one of the most uncomfortable experiences a disrespectful person can have. They must now explain, in plain language, in front of everyone present, exactly why it is funny to say what they just said about you. They must dismantle their own joke. They must expose the mechanics of their malice and hold them up for collective examination. There is no version of this that ends well for them. Either they fumble through an explanation that makes their intent obvious and unflattering, or they admit they cannot explain it, which collapses the joke entirely. The room goes cold. The power shifts. You are now the composed, reasonable adult in the conversation, and they are the person trying to justify something that is becoming more indefensible with every passing second. You did not attack them. You simply asked a question, and the question destroyed them more thoroughly than any comeback could have. Way 5. Information starvation power requires intelligence. Not intelligence in the sense of cleverness. Intelligence in the strategic sense, meaning information. Knowledge of your habits, your plans, your emotional state, your vulnerabilities. The person who has access to this information about you has leverage over you, whether they use it consciously or not. Most people share freely. They update those around them on their projects, their frustrations, their fears, their movements. This is natural in relationships built on genuine trust. But when someone has shown you that they do not respect you, they have also shown you that they should no longer be trusted with the information that gives them access to your interior. Become an enigma to them. Not dramatically, not with obvious and theatrical secrecy, but with the quiet, consistent discipline of someone who has simply reclassified this person in terms of how much they need to know. When they ask how you are doing well. When they ask what you are working on, you are staying busy. When they probe for details about your life, your plans, your emotional state, they receive pleasant, unremarkable, entirely uninformative responses that leave them exactly where they started, with nothing. Machiavelli wrote that the prince whose intentions cannot be read cannot be effectively opposed. When someone who has demonstrated bad faith toward you cannot predict your next move, cannot identify your pressure points, cannot map your vulnerabilities, they lose the primary tool that made their disrespect feel safe to them. They thought they knew you. They believed they had taken your measure. Your silence on the details of your life quietly dismantles that assumption. You become a closed door. And closed doors, to those who expected easy entry, are profoundly unsettling. Way 6. Let your assent be your answer. There is a form of revenge so cold, so complete, and so permanent that it requires no confrontation, no strategy, or no direct engagement with the person who wronged you whatsoever. It requires only one thing, that you become undeniably, visibly, unmistakably more than what they decided to disrespect. This is the long game, and it is the most satisfying game you will ever commit to. When someone disrespects you, they make a calculation. They assess where you are, weigh what they see, and conclude that treating you poorly carries no meaningful risk. They cannot see where you are going. They are making a judgment based entirely on a snapshot of a person still in motion. That is their first mistake. Your job is to make it their most expensive one. Every hour you spend nursing the grievance, plotting the reaction, seeking acknowledgement from someone who has already demonstrated they will not give it, that hour belongs to them. You have taken the finite or irreplaceable currency of your time and spent it on the very person you claim to be done with. This is the trap that anger lays for you, and most people step into it willingly. The alternative is to redirect that energy with absolute ruthlessness into your own construction, your discipline, your finances, your craft, your physical health, your knowledge. The slow, unglamorous, daily accumulation of a version of yourself that the person who disrespected you could not have imagined when they made their assessment. Machiavelli wrote that the wise prince does not waste resources on battles that do not expand his kingdom. Every act of growth is a battle that expands yours. Every morning you choose your work over your anger, your ambition over their memory. You are winning a war they do not even know is being fought. And when you arrive, when the distance between your reality and theirs becomes visible to everyone around you, you will not need to say a single word. Your elevation is the statement. Their irrelevance is the verdict. The best part is that you will barely remember their name. Way 7. Build alliances above their reach. No act of disrespect exists in a vacuum. The person who treated you poorly did so within a social context, a workplace, a community, a circle of relationships where status and standing matter. And almost always, their willingness to disrespect you was partly fueled by a belief that the social terrain favored them, that the tribe, as it were, was on their side. The Machiavellian response does not attack this directly. It bypasses it entirely. Rather than confronting your aggressor, redirect your investment upward and outward. Build genuine, substantive relationships with the people they respect. Become valuable, present, and credible in spaces where they need to maintain their reputation. Not through performance or positioning, but through the real demonstration of your character to people whose opinion carries weight in the environment you both occupy. This is not manipulation. It is the intelligent recognition that social capital moves through networks and that the most effective way to neutralize someone's power over you is not to attack their position, but to make their position irrelevant by securing better ones. When the person who disrespected you sees you building rapport with their superiors, being included in conversations they are excluded from, are being trusted by the people whose trust they most need, the geography of the situation changes entirely. They have not just lost a confrontation with you, they have watched you bypass them. They are still on the ground floor, looking up at a floor they cannot access, wondering how you got there without them noticing. Sun Tzu called this the indirect approach. Win the war by making the enemy's position strategically irrelevant. You are not fighting for the room anymore. You have already moved into a different building. Way. 8. Patience as a precision weapon. Of everything in this framework, this requires the most internal strength and delivers the most complete outcomes. It is also the most counterintuitive because it asks you to do something that feels like nothing, and trust that nothing is, in fact, everything. On people who disrespect others are rarely disciplined. The same ego that drove them to treat you poorly, the same impulsiveness, the same compulsive need to dominate and diminish, these are not qualities of careful, long-term thinkers. These are qualities of people who are perpetually one bad decision away from exposing everything they have carefully presented to the world. Machiavelli observed this pattern repeatedly across courts and kingdoms. The person who wins the moment of disrespect very often loses the much longer war that follows because the character flaw that produced the disrespect continues producing consequences long after the original incident has faded. Your most powerful move is to step back. Remove the friction. Stop providing the resistance that gives their ego something to push against. Without your visible reaction, and without your attempts to defend or retaliate, they are forced to find other stages, other targets, other audiences for the same behavior. And in finding them, they build a record. They will burn bridges you never had to touch. They will create enemies you never had to recruit. They will accumulate the kind of reputation that no charm offensive can permanently repair. And when it happens, and it will happen, you will be standing clean, composed, and entirely uninvolved. Not because you escaped the conflict, but because you were wise enough to let them conduct it entirely with themselves. Justice delivered through a person's own behavior is permanent. Justice delivered through your outrage is temporary and often circles back. Choose the permanent kind. Wait for it. It always arrives. Way 9. The State. Nothing can reach everything that came before this moment has been preparation. The silence, the professionalism, the withdrawal of access, the cold inquiry, the information discipline, the elevation, the alliances, the patience, all of it has been building toward this, the final state, the place where the truly sovereign among us actually live. Genuine, arrived at, bone-deep indifference. Let us be precise about what makes disrespect painful, because most people misunderstand it. It is not the words or the behavior itself that causes the damage. It is the fact that you care what the person thinks. Somewhere inside you, their opinion holds weight. Their judgment stings because some part of you has granted them the authority to evaluate you, and as long as that permission exists, you remain available to be hurt. Would you remain, in the most fundamental sense, under their influence? Machiavelli's most profound insight was not tactical. It was this: the prince who needs nothing from his enemies cannot be manipulated by his enemies. The man who has achieved genuine internal sovereignty cannot be reached by those who have no place in his interior world. This is not armor. Armor can be found and broken. This is the absence of a target entirely. The work of arriving here is not dramatic. It is slow and largely invisible. It is the daily practice of sourcing your sense of worth from your own values, your own actions, your own standards, and progressively withdrawing it from the external world's verdict on you. It is the gradual, honest confrontation with the parts of yourself that still seek approval from people who have shown they will not provide it. It is choosing, repeatedly, to locate your foundation inside yourself rather than in the shifting, unreliable terrain of other people's opinions. When you arrive at this place, something becomes visible in how you carry yourself that cannot be faked and cannot be fully described. People sense it before they can name it. The person who once disrespected you reaches for the familiar lever and finds it is no longer connected to anything. The words land and dissolve. The behavior registers with the emotional significance of weather passing through, noted, briefly, and forgotten. Anger, at its root, is a confession of pain. Revenge, at its root, is a confession of obsession. But indifference, real indifference, is the hallmark of someone who has completed something internally that most people never begin. You are not performing unbothered, so you are not straining against your reaction. You are simply, genuinely, no longer available to be diminished by people who were never your equals to begin with. Does the mountain notice when someone shouts at its base? Does it reorganize itself around the opinions of those who cannot reach its summit? It does not. It remains, unchanged, unbothered, precisely and permanently itself. That is the destination. Not the strategies, not the tactics. Those are tools for the journey. The destination is a version of yourself so internally complete, so genuinely rooted, so fully sovereign that the question of what others think of you becomes, at last, genuinely uninteresting. 9 ways, 9 principles, each one a step in the construction of something the world cannot easily touch. Your peace, your clarity, your complete and total freedom from the smallness of people who were never in a position to define you. Respect is not requested. It is not negotiated. It is not even demanded. It is simply the natural consequence of becoming a person the world cannot afford to ignore. Now go build that person.